age to purchase and consume cannabis in your region. This production is for adults only. Welcome to the Cannabis 101 podcast, part of the Cannabis Life Experience. Your guide through the legalization and consumption of cannabis in Canada and beyond. Join us on this journey and adventure with the wonderful plant. Here's your host, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 83 of the Cannabis 101 podcast. This is hour number 2. My name is Dean Millard, and remember, on this show, it's not just about getting high, it's about getting healthy. Do we talk about getting high? Do we talk about the intoxication? Sure, but we also talk about many of the different kind of benefits that this plant can give you. And there is certainly one unique way, I think, that we get things started on this show before we get into the nuts and bolts, and that's by finding out, what's your groove?
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Can you dig it?
Kinda grabs you by the boo-boo, don't it?
Pipe in a crate, long in a flint.
This is great. This is the bee's knees.
Can you dig it?
So when I ask you, what's your groove, I'm wondering that while you're watching this show, if indeed you are grooving with something, maybe it's a joint, maybe it's a bong, maybe it's just some CBD like I had on Monday, some nice CBD tea. But whatever you're grooving with, edibles, I don't know, let me know what it might be. Hit me up on Twitter at the Cannabis 101. You can also reach us on Instagram and Facebook at the Cannabis 101 podcast. And you can chime in and remain anonymous if you'd like to. And that is by email, cannabis101podcast at gmail.com. All right. I am going to be grooving with a bit of a rarity for me in the last little while, a joint, particularly since I was getting over pneumonia, but feeling much better today. And I'm going with 48 North's Franco, well, it's Strain Hunters, Franco's Lemon Cheese. Now, this is something, a cultivar that Chris and I did way back when it was called What's Your Strain? Now it's called Know Your Buds. I was really impressed with the story behind this. Franco Roja was just a legendary cannabis advocate. Unfortunately, lost his life trying to heal people and help people with malaria by using CBD and some products. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be grooving with. And got the old hemp wick lighter there. I highly recommend it for anybody out there. You're not inhaling lighter fluid, and you're not burning the joint as much as well. Now, I suck at lighting. Oftentimes I canoe it, so we will see as I get my groove on. Check back in the archives at the Cannabis 101 podcast, and you can get information about Franco's Lemon Cheese. Delicious. Okay, let's find out now what's coming down the hash pipe on this particular episode. Excuse me there, getting me a little too much of the Franco's Lemon Cheese. As mentioned, I don't smoke a lot of joints as much as I certainly used to, or use the bongs as much as I used to. On this program, Fatty Kamel from All Risks Insurance Brokers, we are going to discuss cannabis insurance and what you should know if you're going into the space, if you're growing at home, depending on, if you're rec or medical, and just how bad the stigma really is. I mean, wait till you hear the story that Fatty will tell about the reaction they received. And they're an insurance company. They're the farthest thing from actually having cannabis in your hand. It was just the word. Unbelievable. Chris Ianson, regional manager from Plant Life Cannabis, is going to drop by. We've got a little Dukem. I almost said Duke Nukem. We got some Dukem from Royal City Cannabis. Looking forward. This is just gorgeous. Wait till you get a look at this stuff. It's absolutely awesome. And our cannabis question is about CBD on this episode. We will also bring you what pairs well with cannabis. We'll tell you about the Weed Weekly and the giveaway we do every Friday. Oh, and I want to mention a slight change in programming for the Cannabis 101 podcast. A little while ago, we went from one show and split it up into 2 hours, Monday and Wednesday. Starting next week, so episode 84, hour number 1 will come out Tuesday mornings. And so we'll have a show on Tuesday, a show on Wednesday, and then individual segments will come out Thursday, Friday, and Monday. And we'll give you the weekends off most likely, although we might have one-hitters coming out on the weekends. So if you don't see a show on Monday, that's why. The hour number 1 will now be coming out Tuesday mornings. Hour number 2, as usual, will come out Wednesday mornings. I usually try to put them out at 4:20 a.m. Mountain Time, so you can set your clock for that if you really are excited about the show. So that's some news that we have for you about the Cannabis 101 podcast. Right now, let's get things started with the cannabis question.
It's prize time. Chime in on the cannabis question.
Okay.
And you could win a Cannabis 101 podcast prize pack.
Pipe and a crepe, bong and a blint.
Hit us up on any of our social media feeds or email us at cannabis101podcast@gmail.com.
Okay, here we go.
So the question today, and if you're watching, you can see it on the screen. If you're listening and you'd like to check out the video version, just head to YouTube and search for the Cannabis 101 podcast. We have our channel up there. What do you specifically like about CBD? What do you get? What is your experience with CBD? I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up on Twitter at the Cannabis 101. You can get us on Facebook, the Cannabis 101 podcast. Same with Instagram, and you can email and you can be anonymous if you would like to cannabis101podcast@gmail.com. This comes in from Randy when we're talking about CBD concentrates, because I said last week I didn't know if there was shatter or batter or wax or anything like that you could use in something like the Slash from Stone Smiths. And he says Tweedle Farms produces a CBD concentrate that works in the Slash. They call it wax and is more solid than butter, but not like shatter. Scoops up with a loading tool just fine. That built-in loading tool is awesome. Randy goes on to say, CBD makes me feel fortified during the day. I also use a water-soluble powder in my Rockstar. Tweedle Farms also makes vape cartridges, and I will hit the hemp cart after a THC cart for balance. I can definitely feel a stronger effect together. That's my story. Take it easy, Randy. And for those out there, CBD is often something that you can use if you feel like it's too intense and too high. You can take some CBD, and it does help to bring that down. And as Randy was mentioning, he gets a bit of a balance. So thank you very much for that email, Randy. Really appreciate everybody who reaches out with questions, comments, or anything like that. For me, CBD, and I mentioned this earlier, just kind of takes the edge off, just rounds those sharp corners, if you will. I oftentimes will use CBD in the mornings, and then in the afternoons, I'll maybe jump into some THC or something like that. Also for tolerance breaks, when I want to take a break from THC, but I still want to get the benefits from the cannabis plant for my mental health, I will often use CBD in my Volcano hybrid, the Supernova that I picked up at Nova Cannabis on Jasper Ave in Edmonton, Chris Ionson's old stomping grounds. So I will often use CBD when I'm doing tea breaks, as well as in the morning. I take a spray or capsules, whatever I have on hand, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. I treat it just like my vitamins that I take and my St. John's wort and some of the other things that I use for my mental health. And CBD, it's amazing. I used to run out of it more often. I very rarely do now, but whenever I do, or if I've missed, for some reason, I missed out on for a day or two, I start noticing it just to feel a little bit different. So for me, it's a big part of my regime and my routine, and I'm really excited about the future research into the cannabis plant and some of the more cool things that we are certainly going to get from that research. So we have a Cannabis 101 podcast prize pack for anybody that chimes in. You go into a draw in a hat, and we pull out a name, and then we give away a prize pack. Just for chiming in, what do you specifically like about CBD? Hit me up on Twitter at the Cannabis 101. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, the Cannabis 101 Podcast. And if you would just like to email me, feel free. Cannabis 101 Podcast at gmail.com. Love to hear from listeners, viewers, and cannabis fans alike. All right, as for what pairs well with cannabis, that is anything that you like to do with cannabis. I'd love to hear from you on that. For me, it's binge watching. I'm a big Western guy. So right now I have the free trial of one of the apps that's showing the show, that has the show Rawhide on it. So I've been just going through crazy episodes, like 5-6 seasons, just ripping through them on my spare time. And I love it. I love to have, I like to, when I watch something, I kind of put myself in the place of these characters. Cannabis certainly helps with me doing that. So binge watching, I'm really enjoying Rawhide. You set up the volcano with either the bag or the whip, and there you go. It's like you're going on a trail drive while high, or enjoying some CBD, whatever the case might be. So that's what pairs well with cannabis for me. I would love to hear from you on what you pair well with cannabis. All right, on hour number one, we usually have David Wiley from the OZ on This Week in Cannabis News, Malcolm LaBelle on the business of cannabis. She's from the Green Generation Co. Those are two very important partners and supporters of this show. We also have had Andre from Regal Cigars be a big fan and a big supporter. We've been able to give away a lot of Regal cigars, which are just amazing. Those are mint. And we also love to say thanks to some other local supporters in Edmonton, the makers of The Slash, Stonesmiths, a great local company. As Randy was mentioning in his email about the built-in loader, here it is right there. That's how you scoop things up on The Slash, and then you load it in there. I've got some wax for Quest in there. That's really nice. And then you got the different temperature settings. Just 3 clicks, and it changes the temperature setting. You got green, blue, and red, and it's so cool. And they're actually making this thing even better, if you can believe it. There is a new chamber on the way. It's a redesign of the internal coil, and this thing only takes 4 seconds to heat up. Apparently, it's going to be faster, and we're all going to be having bigger clouds. So it's really cool. If you'd like to get some information, head to stonesmiths.ca. If you're a retail store, check that out as well and get it in your store. And if you've picked up one of these, send me an email. Let me know where you bought it from. Did you buy it directly from them? Did you buy it from your local store? I'd love to hear from people of where they have picked up a very cool vape pen. Okay, we are going to get into the insurance game, and I learned so much from this conversation with Fatty Kamel from All Risk Insurance Brokers, and we're going to hear from him right after we hear the Weed song from the artist My Dead Dog.
let's go smoke some grass. It's time to bust out this podcast.
Fatty, it is great to chat with you. I know you and I have been going back and forth for quite a while. Unfortunately, some pneumonia got in the way, but we're finally getting around to chatting. So thanks very much for being on the Cannabis 101 podcast. How are things out east as Western Canada begins to thaw out? What are things like out east in the Toronto area?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dean. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're feeling better. That's the most important thing. And yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you making some time to have us on the show. So I'm currently in Mississauga, and the weather looks good, but it's a little deceiving. I know we're not out of the woods just yet. But yeah, sun is shining, but there's still snow. So things can change really quickly, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I remember I was in Toronto in the area for the World Juniors in 2015, and while the temperature was much warmer than it was in Alberta, that wind and that cold that you guys get off coming off that lake in the wintertime, I would not want to have to deal with it. I'll take our dry and lots of snow out here. But we're here today to talk about insurance, and this is something that is obviously relatively new for the cannabis industry, as is the cannabis industry. So I guess I always like to ask people kind of how long they've been involved in the particular industry. So how long have you been involved in the insurance industry, and when did you get into the cannabis aspect of insurance?
Yeah, for sure. So insurance, been about 10 going on 11 years now. So I just started at, TD Insurance, doing regular home and auto, not too fun stuff. I was fresh out of school and looking to make some money. So been doing that for about 10 years. I think the neat thing about, my career over the last 10 years is I've got to see a lot of different, call them departments, operations, different sides of the insurance business. And that really helps me kind of understand the full circle of how insurance works from, the broker side where I am now, all the way to the underwriters who actually look at your applications and price them and decide, what type of coverage they want to give you, et cetera. So that really has helped me just understand, from start to finish, the entire process, whether you're client facing or you're on the company side. In terms of cannabis insurance, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah, keep going.
Awesome. In terms of cannabis insurance specifically, started working with a large LP in early 2016. And that's kind of what triggered me to say, well, this is something that we need to focus more on, me personally. And that's when things started in early 2016.
Was there, unfortunately, the cannabis industry, there's still a stigma towards cannabis. So, there's no doubt about it. Was there any kind of stigma that you felt when you started working with the cannabis industry? Did people be like, oh, cannabis, or, kind of look down upon it? And has that maybe changed since 2016, if there indeed was any?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely with insurance companies, at the time there was probably only 2 or 3 that even entertained the cannabis word. Meanwhile, the rest of them did definitely have that kind of negative tone or reaction when we asked if it's something they do. And it's funny because we're looking at insurance. We're not even looking at, actual cannabis use or operations. Like, we're looking at insuring the company. And yeah, definitely felt a little bit of a stigma. I would say that the biggest one where I was like, wow, this is like still happening. Last year, we were looking to open a new office. So I used to work for or under another broker with all risks. And as of May 2020, so last year, we opened our own office. And at the time, we were looking for, locations to rent. We were really close at signing a lease. And sure enough, the realtor that we were working with came back and said, the landlord looked you up on LinkedIn and they didn't want to work with anybody in the cannabis kind of space. And yeah, to me, it was like, hold on a second. If you really look at it, cannabis is actually what's paying the bills. Like, that's how I'm going to get you your rent money. But really, they saw it as, oh man, they're around cannabis, they're going to sit there and smoke, and we're not going to get our money for the month. When in fact, it was the opposite. It was, this is a company that today is in an industry that's growing and that has a great opportunity ahead of them. They'll probably be here for a really long time. So when I felt that was the really first time I said, wow, and this is last year, that it's very strong, the stigma. And I always knew, like, at home or within families, certain cultures, yeah, there's going to be that stigma, but I didn't expect it in that way outside in the professional world. That was a little bit of a surprise for me, right?
That's just crazy. I mean, you are feeling the stigma because of the word cannabis on paper. Like, your business, there would never be any cannabis in there. Like, that's amazing that just the word alone brought out that stigma and that fear in people.
It scared them. Yeah, it scared them. And for me, I'm a pretty calm guy in general. Like, I understand things happen for a reason, and you just got to deal with them and move on. So as soon as it happened, I was like, all right, what's next? This is not the place for us. And I kept moving, but it just made me really realize that people don't understand what this is, or they don't care to understand what this is. Because if you really do your homework, this is not only a real industry, but it's something that has helped a lot of people. That's way less dangerous than a lot of things that we put in our bodies or are acceptable to us. And people just don't see it. And that's fine. They may never. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for people like us, your show, people like me, to really let others understand that it's not what it was or what you guys think it used to be. This is something way more positive and powerful.
Mm-hmm. That reaction could be straight out of a remake of Reefer Madness, like Reefer Madness 2020, where people are still scared that there's going to be riots in the streets over cannabis. And you know what? Unfortunately for those people, they're going to be the ones that are going to be left behind in this industry if they don't want to get on board. Like, people think of the cannabis industry as a bunch of guys sitting around, or girls, growing weed, smoking it, and getting high. They don't think about, the lawyers, the insurance, the carpenters, and all these things that are also part of the industry, because somebody has to build those stores. And if you don't want to get into the industry, sure, that's fine. But look at the 2020 retail sales numbers, 120% increase, taking a bite out of the illicit market. This industry is growing, and it's going to be their own loss if they don't want to get involved. And that's their personal choice.
For sure, definitely. I think the industry is just getting started, especially here in Ontario. We haven't even seen what retail looks like yet in Ontario. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think, the ones that decide that this is something that's acceptable and that it's a real business that can make lots of money, definitely will be ahead. The challenge, I think, for me is the ones who will take, for example, prescription medication or drink alcohol like it's completely okay and acceptable. But the minute you talk about cannabis, they have this look on their face like, oh, that's gross. Well, hold on a second. If you really look at what you're putting into your body, and that just tells me it's not a matter of facts. It's not somebody that read on these two items and has made their decision. It's a matter of opinion. It's how they feel, how they were taught to feel growing up. And I think eventually, it might take a while, but eventually that's easier to change, because once things, around you are more acceptable, it makes it that much easier. Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, science is going to change a lot of that. The amount of research being done on the plants, and I've said this, many times on this show, that the fact that I can go to my local store, buy a joint, come home, smoke it without my neighbor calling the cops is awesome. But the biggest thing about legalization is the amount of research that can now be done. A lot more of it we're going to know, and then that science is going to start convincing people that it's not dangerous, that it is a plant, and it can be used correctly, be very, very beneficial. beneficial. And I wonder kind of how working in the cannabis space has improved, the work life for you guys, getting into that space when maybe other people didn't want to. Has that helped grow the all risks insurance and brokers?
Yeah, for sure. So I can remember I believe it was summer of 2016, there were probably three brokers at Lyft, that downtown Toronto. And 2019, I was out of town, unfortunately. Remember those days, Dean, when we could be out of town? Yeah. It sounded weird just saying it, but yeah. So I was out of the country in 2019 during Lyft, and there was probably 30 brokers, insurance brokers at Lyft. So definitely being there nice and early has helped. In terms of growth, yeah, it's really allowed me to focus in and specialize in one specific area. So prior to cannabis, I was still working with any type of business. So manufacturing companies, restaurants, you name it, any type of business that requires insurance. But once, I was in there early enough and working with, the right clients, it really allowed me to just say, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to specialize in. And it definitely gave us a sense of direction, obviously a sense of growth because, the cannabis industry was new and growing. And we were there right from the beginning, which is awesome.
Yeah, indeed. Just to be able to build those kind of early relationships. What about yourself personally? Is cannabis a part of your personal life?
Yeah, definitely. So I always tell people I've been working in cannabis for 5 years, but I've been studying it for 30 plus. So definitely something that I'm aware about how the good and bad of it, because obviously just like anything, if you don't control it, it can be a negative, right? Mm-hmm. Anything. Food is great, but if you don't treat it right, it can hurt you. So definitely, I think there was times, when I was younger growing up where, it did affect me. It did kind of slow me down. But at the end of the day, it's the way I was using it. I didn't understand how it needs to be used to your advantage. And today, definitely still using, I would say more kind of CBD, relaxation, sleep, pain relief type of stuff. But definitely something I use daily, and I've gotten some of my family members as well to use and try CBD. Like my mom has really chronic arthritis, corporal tunnel, so a lot of joint pain, and the amount of meds that she takes over a course of a day, it is crazy when you look at it. So I'm trying to remove those and replace them with oil or lotions. We've only been a couple months, so I don't think she's super comfortable just yet. But I think eventually I would love to see majority of those things gone and just one bottle of really good CBD oil.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of our question, our cannabis question this week is what specifically do you like about CBD? And for me, it's just that people and probably still do. They talk about like, oh, I took the edge off last night with 3 fingers of scotch or something like that, right? Well, for CBD, it takes the edge off of things without intoxication. The word high is different for many different people. You can be a high on life, for relationships. So I would say it just doesn't get me intoxicated, but still gives me an elevated feeling of relief, and some of my anxiety comes down, aches and pains and things like that. So I also agree. I don't ever pretend that CBD is a cure-all, but it can just help with a lot of things. I'll use Alzheimer's and dementia. Well, it's not going to give that memory back yet. We don't know, but it's going to relax that patient maybe when they're in those agitated states, and it also could be better for the caregiver as well. So I just think CBD can be very beneficial in many different areas with, not, cure all, but helping all.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to note that. Like, for example, I always tell whoever I'm speaking to about CBD and how good it can be for you. They ask me like, oh, well, is it strong? Is it powerful? And I kind of tell them, no, compared to the drugs that you're taking, no,
Right.
it's not that strong. And that's the best part about it is, it's not a narcotic. It's going to give you a sense of relief without that really strong medical, I guess, or medicine type of feeling. So, that part for me, I think is important to differentiate. Some people think they only want to do it if it's going to give them the relief that their current drugs would give them. And it's important to recognize the difference. Right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So we're 2+ years into legalization, and I know you've been working in the cannabis space before that. But are there a lot of options currently in the cannabis industry? When you compare it to some of the other industries, are there a lot of options, or like I wonder, you guys got in early. Are people now rushing to try to get into the cannabis insurance game?
So yeah, that's a great question. There's definitely more options than there was 3 years ago, but in terms of a lot, no. There's still only a few insurance companies who are not only willing to accept cannabis companies, but who can actually offer the right coverages, so that limits that we need, and at the right price. So I have a company who says, yeah, we'll insure retail stores, but our minimum premium for a retail store is $20K, for example. So it's like, yeah, they'll do it, but who's going to pay that? Nobody. It just doesn't make sense. So the ones that actually do it and do it well, there's still only a handful. And us being there that early has definitely helped build the relationship with them. But we've seen more players entering. So for example, a retail store in Ontario up until December was required to carry 10 million in liability insurance. That was just changed in December to 5 million. But previous to December, there was only 2 companies who would do the full 10 million. I had some other companies saying, hey, yeah, we'll do it, but we can only do 5, or our price is through the roof. So, there's a lot of companies who want to or say they will, but just like any insurance, they're only going to give up as much risk that they're willing to take. And that's the challenge, is finding a company who can do it well, meet all of the legal requirements that for an LP, for example, needs to operate, and doing it within a price that they can afford and that they can continue to operate.
Do you think that, that's kind of, there's maybe they're still a little bit leery? It seems like you and what you guys are doing really believe in this industry, and maybe there's only that partial buy-in from some people out there in the insurance industry.
Yeah, so insurance in general is really slow to react. So they're only going to put up what they legally have to. They don't want to give up or risk more than they need to. That's the business they're in, is mitigating their risk, right? Mitigating the chance that they're going to have to pay out. It sounds bad, but that's the business that they're in. So as much as possible, yeah, they're only going to give you as much as they have to, as much as Health Canada or the AGCO says you need this to operate, they'll give just that and no more if they don't need to. But to answer your question, like, the companies still have, or are they hesitant? I would say, yeah, they don't want to, insurance is all about data. It's, you take previous history and data to forecast what you expect to happen. Because there is no data, because there is no previous history of claims in cannabis, they're very hesitant to put up certain limits. I'll give you a really quick example of an early policy that we were working on. So in 2016, leading up to 2017, or leading up to legalization, one of the large LPs that we were working with required product recall coverage. So at the time, they were only medicinal, and they were looking to get into rec. So they required product recall for cannabis. There was no such product. By product, I mean coverage for insurance companies. It just didn't exist. So we sent out, a couple applications to a few different companies. We got one quote back. The other company basically came back and said, hey, what is the price of the other quote that you got? Like, can you share that with us? They had no clue where to even begin. So we kind of helped them and said, yeah, this is what Health Canada requires for the LPs to do business. You better, be able to offer that, or else, you're going to be left behind. So definitely something that we had to help the insurance companies get more comfortable with. And I think as years pass and more history and data shows that this is actually a great risk from an insurance perspective for insurance companies, because the amount of security and compliance and reporting requirements that are put on an LP or even a retail store is so high that it already reduces the chance of a claim or of the insurance company having to pay out. And when I realized that was pretty early. Even when I worked for the insurance companies, we did an inspection on a grow in BC, and it was a medical grow at the time. And we got this inspection back, I believe this was in about 2014. And we got this inspection back, and the whole purpose of us inspecting the business was to say, hey, do we want to insure cannabis grows? Yes or no? The way we knew a cannabis grow was, those shady hanging lights and, garbage bags everywhere. So when we saw this, we looked at it and said, hold on a second. They have put so much into, fire safety and inspections, and they've done a lot of our mitigation efforts already. So they're already reducing the chance of something happening compared to, the metal shop across the street that nobody is looking at, right? So I think it was important for us to just show the insurance companies that, hey, listen, these are actually much better and much more profitable businesses to insure, even though you don't have the data yet. All of these reasons show why the chance of a claim here is much less.
Yeah, it's so funny. There's nothing to rely on. This is the starting point for it. So here we are looking at www.cannabisinsuranceSolutions.ca, and this is where people can go and find out how they can work with you. So maybe tell us and our viewers and listeners what type of clients that you have worked with, you are working with during your time in cannabis insurance.
Yeah, for sure. So we teamed up with a couple large LPs, really early on, and that helped us just understand everything that you need kind of from day one. So what will you need in 6 months? Once you get your sales license, what type of insurance will you need then? And that's really helped us, work today with, say, a new micro, for example, that's just getting their license, or that's just getting a location. We can really and confidently speak to them on timelines and rough estimates of how much insurance is going to cost, so that they can plan accordingly. So yeah, in terms of the type of clients, for sure, LPs are some of our biggest clients, of course. We even insure consultants. So if you're a cannabis consultant, you need errors and emissions insurance. Any type of consultant needs E&O or errors and emissions. We insure accessory and manufacturers. So grinders, bongs, pipes. People get those things made overseas, brought over here. What else? Of course, retail stores. So we're working towards being the retail insurance leader in the country, and we're definitely on our way to achieve that. And yeah, retail is a big part of what we do, especially right now in Ontario. Like, we're probably speaking to minimum 5 retailers, new retailers every week, that are either close to licensing or have just applied for licensing. So it's definitely a really busy time for retail. But other than that, any business around cannabis that involves the cannabis word. So maybe you're a transportation company, you're a contractor, and you work we insure a camera contractor, and he does IT and camera work for cannabis stores. He requires a specialized policy. So anything with that cannabis word, your regular insurance companies will not insure you, even if you're around it, like just as your clients. And really what we focus on today, I would say, is definitely retail as well as cultivation. So, the LPs require so many different policies. I'll just name off a few of them, but they require directors and officers insurance to protect the board and the entity from being sued by the shareholders. They require their product recall. Of course, they require insurance for the actual facility and all of the physical property inside. So whether that's actual flower, the equipment, etc. They require general liability. Away from the product recall, you need general liability if someone just comes to your building and slips and falls, for example. Yeah, so many different policies that an LP needs, and us working with them really early just helped understand the needs of everybody after that. So.
Yeah, it's such a vast game with everything being so new. Just that word cannabis, like you said, requires that insurance. Now, I know we've been talking a lot about retail and LPs, but quick question about we're allowed to grow 4 plants, at least everybody except Manitoba. Quebec, they appealed and the government lost, but they're appealing. Hopefully Manitoba gets overturned. But are there impacts to your insurance if you are growing your 4 plants at home, or maybe you're a medical grower?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So as long as you're growing your 4 plants, because it's legally allowed, the insurance companies have had to build it into their policy. So basically saying, yep, you're allowed to grow the legal maximum that you can. However, they've also included a special limit for cannabis. So it's interesting. Your existing home policy would have a special limit for certain items. These items are usually easily stolen. So like, they're small, like jewelry, a watch, for example, or even a bike. Bikes are stolen often. So they're either, they are easily stolen and high value, or can be high value. So, some of those bikes, not the ones like I rode to school, but some of those professional bikes can be very costly. Of course, jewelry, watches, they have special limits on those items, because even though you have a huge, 100,000 in coverage, these special items they want to make sure you don't have one watch that's 100,000 and it gets stolen. So they've actually done the same for cannabis. They've said any type of cannabis in your home, the maximum, I believe most companies today put a maximum of $1,000 on cannabis. So let's say you purchase cannabis at the store, you bring it home, either get stolen or there's a fire, for example. The maximum that you could claim for cannabis products is $1,000. In terms of affecting your home insurance, as long as you're only growing the 4 plants, it will not impact your home insurance. Anything after that can definitely have an impact. One, on your premium. So if you tell your insurance company your price could go up, most likely your price won't go up. If they can't or don't want to insure you, they'll just say, nope, we don't do any more than 4, and you have to go find another option. But the other challenge is not just the price going up. It's if you notify them and they say, no, we're not going to insure you, go somewhere else.
Yeah, so really it's probably impacting medical growers who, a lot of medical growers who have their license do grow more than 4 plants. If you're the 4 plants on the rec side, you're probably, you're okay, but the medical side, people should be looking into that.
Definitely. Yeah, I would highly recommend speaking to someone first before calling your insurance company. And that's the great thing about having a broker, is we kind of act as a filter between you and the insurance company. So if you called your insurer today, let's say you're with X bank insurance, and you called them and said, yeah, I'm growing 5 plants, you've already told them what you're doing, and there's nothing that you can do to take that back. Where what we do is we have that discussion first. So I say, hey, sure, you have 5 plants. How are they being grown? Or can you show me a picture? And then we find ways before we notify the insurance company that will help our case. Obviously, we have to be accurate, because at the end of the day, if there's a claim, I'm not helping you if I don't make sure or do my best to make sure the insurance company is going to be there for us. But there's ways to position it to the insurance company that will make it much more attractive than it can be, right?
So what advice would you give somebody who is maybe already in the retail game or looking to get into the retail game, looking to buy a franchise? What sort of advice would you give them if they were looking to get into that, as far as, what insurance options or what sort of things they should be researching?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I get it a lot, especially today. People just asking, like, is it too late? Is it there's a lot of retail stuff happening. Should we jump in? And the biggest thing I tell people is, now compared to 2017, it's no longer, hey, we sell cannabis and open your doors and you're going to make a ton of money. Like, the business now has to have a real strategic plan, and it's a real business. Like, we insured one of the first stores that opened up downtown Toronto on day one that they were allowed to open. And, at that time, it didn't matter what you were selling. It didn't matter what your name was. You were going to have a lineup for days and weeks to come. And today it's completely different. The good thing is, there's still a lot of opportunity. Like, we speak to retailers in Godrich, in Innisville, in all of these markets that I personally think are much more attractive than downtown Toronto. Yes, you don't have the flow of traffic or the population, but in those areas, I feel like it'll be a lot more consistent, especially if you're looking at, Innisfil for the summer and you really get those peak seasons. I think there's a lot of opportunity depending on your location, depending on your brand. It is definitely a challenge. Like, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure. But I don't think, today it's definitely not too late. You just have to make sure you're doing it right. You're doing it with the right team. And that's a big thing that as of recently, I have kind of added and realized how important it is. So, the insurance companies that do cannabis, there can be accessed by any broker. As long as you have a contract with that company, you can reach out to them and insure a cannabis store. The difference is what additional kind of expertise and value are you adding to your client? So now when I speak to a client, we have built such a good network of, technology people, branding, consultants, lawyers, whatever it is that you're looking for that we can help with. And for me, to be honest, that part of my job is just as rewarding, probably more rewarding than insurance. Insurance is a piece of paper. It says, yep, you're covered if anything happens. I take that very seriously. I want to make sure you have the best coverage available to you. But the other side of it for me is, hey, if I can introduce you to somebody and they can help you bring your business to the next level, I just feel like everybody wins, right? I win. The person that I'm sending them to wins, and obviously you as the client, if you're gaining knowledge and expertise from somebody that can really push you to another step, again, it's good for everybody.
All right, so we've chatted about retail, even home grows and big LPs. What about on the micro side or some of the smaller craft growers? Is it the same sort of insurance that they need as the big LPs, but just maybe on a smaller scale, or is it completely different?
So for the most part, very consistent with what an LP would need. I mean, I always like to split insurance into kind of two buckets. One is your physical property, so physical assets, whether that's, product for sale, equipment, etc., buildings. The other is your liability, and that's if you're being sued due to your business, whether someone tries your product and tries to sue you or comes to your building, slips and falls. So, a lot of those, we call them exposures, are the exact same, whether you're a micro or you're an LP. Yes, at a smaller scale. But in terms of the type of policies or coverages that you need, they're very, very similar. Something that we've helped, I guess, with micros do is there's a product recall requirement for an LP if you're selling into the OCS. So not even for an LP, for anybody who's selling product into the OCS, they require 15 million in product recall coverage. That coverage obviously can be pretty costly. And what some micros have done is if they're selling, so let's say you're a micro, you don't have a sales license and you're selling through the LP. So you're just selling to the LP and they're selling it through their sales license to the OCS. You can negotiate with the LP and include your name, your products on their recall insurance policy because they're the ones at the end with the sales license. And that has helped some of our clients kind of keep costs down, especially in the beginning stages. So those are some things that I think with micros, we try to help them and say, yes, you still need all of the same coverage as an LP does, but at that level, they're pricey or they're costly. What can we do today to make sure you're still protected and save you, look after your dollar as well?
Now, the one thing about the legalization process is that it was, federally legalized and then handed out to the provinces to decide what they want to do. It's why we see very, very strict things going on in Quebec. Well, here in Alberta, you get a store, you get a store. Oprah's giving out cannabis stores here in Alberta because everybody seems to have one. So is that difficult? I don't know if you work with a whole lot of clients that are outside of Ontario, but the different provincial regulations, do they come in play? So there's different insurance options depending on the province, or when it comes to his insurance, is it all one set thing across the country?
For sure. No, that's a great question. So early on, we actually started retail out in Alberta because you guys were ready much faster than Ontario was. So we teamed up with an association out in Alberta, and we're providing their members retail insurance at a discounted rate for being a member with them, and that really helped us understand the differences between Alberta and Ontario. One example. That 10 million requirement that we used to have here in Ontario, it's now down to 5. Alberta never had that. So technically, a store in Alberta can have 2 million in liability, the same as a restaurant or some convenience store beside them. Where here in Ontario, when retail did start, we had to have 10 million. So all of a sudden, rates are much higher because you require more coverage. So, to answer your question kind of as short as possible, yes, the differences between provinces are important more than for protection or for coverage. It's for you to do the best thing for your client. If I'm insuring a bunch of Ontario stores and someone in Alberta calls me and I don't know the differences, he's probably going to pay more than he needs to. So yeah, it's important to understand the differences in terms of from a coverage perspective, whether you are covered in Ontario or covered in BC. The coverage is Canada-wide. So as long as you've notified the insurance company, let's say you're a consultant and you do business right across Canada, as long as they're aware of it, then yeah, your coverage applies to the entire country. The most important thing for us, of course, is when we work with clients in those other provinces, is one, you have to, as a broker, you have to be licensed to sell insurance in that province. So that's a little bit of a barrier for us to get into certain provinces because the insurance licensing requirements may be different or may be challenging. So what we've done is we actually went, of course, and got licensed in Alberta. We're currently working on licensing in BC. That one's a little bit trickier because of how their insurance in general just works. And then we've teamed up in the meantime with some brokers in each province where the need has arose. So in BC, we have a broker that we partner with. Actually, just last week, we found a broker in Nova Scotia that we sent a client to from Nova Scotia. So yeah, we're definitely have to be creative and be able to adapt and insure people in every province. That's kind of the biggest challenge. I would say it's more insurance related, not necessarily cannabis related.
This has been very, very eye-opening and certainly educational, and I think the listeners and the viewers, especially those looking or in the cannabis space, can get something out of it. And I always like to wrap up all of my interviews with one question, and that is, what do you think is the next big thing when it comes to cannabis? Now, this could be in the insurance or just in general, but what do you think is the next big thing to take cannabis and the industry by storm?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure if you asked that 2 or 3 years ago, everyone would be talking about drinks and all the stuff that we're seeing in the more mature markets. Me personally, and I've been kind of waiting for this. I anticipated it was going to come next year. I don't think it will, but the U.S. federally legalizing, I think that's really going to open up a lot of markets, a lot of opportunities. Whether it's Canada to the US, import and export, whether it's internationally. I feel like that's going to be really what changes the the industry in the world, not just for Canada. Once the U.S. federally says okay, a lot of countries and companies will really start to pay more attention.
I could not possibly agree more. I mean, whether you want to like it or not, the United States of America is a trendsetter. I think the UN getting on board, seems like a year ago, maybe it was only probably a couple of months ago, but once the United States gets on board, and that's going to really make things interesting. It's going to force Canada to take a look at its regulations. If we want to be able to compete with the U.S., we're going to have to ease up on some of the regulations, because this is my analogy. We're in an 800-meter race with a 200-meter head start, and we could get passed on the backstretch by the Americans if we're not careful.
Yeah, very easily, man. The U.S. is good at a couple things, and they do them very well. And I think one of them is consumer goods. They know how to get things in the hands of people at a cheap price. So for sure, if we're not careful, we were first, but if we're not careful, we can definitely be left behind very easily. And it doesn't mean companies in Canada won't still be profitable, or we won't still, your company or your store won't still make money. You just won't be the leader. You will be second or even third for that matter. And for Canada, for the amount of cannabis use that we have and where we are today, there's no reason we should be left behind.
Yeah, we should be leading this race by a country mile, or kilometer, as we should say. Fatty, this has been a lot of fun, and certainly eye-opening and very educational for me, and hopefully my listeners and my viewers as well. Thank you so much, and here's to spring being on its way, and we can actually get outside and enjoy cannabis together.
For sure. Thanks, Dean, for having me. I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to, more information on how to get in the industry, or maybe you're already in the industry and having challenges with insurance, we'd definitely be glad to help. So I'll sign off with my favorite pen here. I picked it up at Lyft a couple years ago.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Thanks a lot, Dean.
Great. Thank you so much, Fatty. Take care.
All the best. Thanks.
This is the Cannabis 101 podcast, part of the Cannabis life experience, turning the wheel of cannabis one toke at a time.
That was a really eye-opening conversation, particularly the stigma that they faced when they just wanted to rent a place. It's unbelievable, but good information for those of you growing at home as well, to know if you're over those 4 plants, your insurance rates and certainly things could impact, and good to reach out to a broker before you talk to your insurance company first as well. So great stuff. Thanks big time to Fatty. We've been trying to get that one lined up for a while, so it's good to get some education